I think my main idea for this exhibition, I've always really been interested in storytelling with my work, and I think that's been like a main focus when I create work. And I attended a lecture a couple of years ago at uni which was about the geography of a story, and I think responded to that idea as someone who has moved away from Tassie and returned. Because I really recognised that when I was going to those environments and landmarks that I knew from childhood, that I was really responding to them through, my own associations, through memory and my own personal history with them. And so I think I'm really interested in that idea that we sort of map our environment through our own memories and our own fictions and our own folklore and mythology that's happening around us constantly. And I think that's sort of a really human idea. So I was interested in sort of expanding on that in this exhibition. In my last one, I was really outwardly focused into a broader, local folklore. And for this one, I really wanted to have a more personal exhibition and be looking at my own stories. And also, I suppose, with the quarantine happening at the moment, I was thinking a lot about themes of Garden of Paradise as being locked in your own personal little space. And I think I'm a little bit of a recluse as nature, and so I think my garden is something that's very precious to me, and I think it interests me in the way that people do find a sense of glorification of their own personal spaces, especially when it comes to the garden. I think there's a sense of affection that comes from familiarity, so that these spaces sort of get idealized, and so I think it was important to me that when I was creating these paintings that they were telling my own personal stories about the garden, but also that I wasn't using photo references of the places that I was painting. I really wanted it to be straight from my memory, so that it's the shape of the dam I'm pretty familiar with, but I really wanted to use that sense in creating the spaces, so that they are sort of a glorified and idealized version of the paddock. It's not necessarily that good looking and green and exciting. So Sandy the Whaler was a story that I heard in the aftermath of the Dunelly fires, where there's a local man who owns a whole bunch of horses, including one which is a whaler. And when the fires were coming over, he was attempting to collect all of his belongings and to get out of the path of the fire. And he was attempting to collect all of his horses and take them down to the water where he figured they'd be safest. But Sandy the Whaler kept bringing all of the other horses and leading them back up against one of the sheds. And he kept trying to redirect them, and she'd keep taking them back to the sheds. And eventually it got to the point where the fire was just on top of them, and they just had to stand against the sheds. And so while they were standing there against the sheds, all the horses' manes and tails just started smouldering and catching fire. That heat was so intense. And in the end, the fire went completely over the top of them. And they all survived, and miraculously it was the shed was this one thing that somehow, Sandy had known that this was the one safe spot and had kept them all safe, but I just couldn't get out of my mind just the image of all the horses' manes and tails starting to smoulder. Benson finds the bung. It's about my duck Benson, who discovered he could go upside down in the dam and has not stopped going upside down in the dam since. He's so pleased with the trick. And we lost the bung from the rowboat in the dam. And when it dried out with the season, the bung was completely gone, and it was only when the rains came and the dam filled back up again and Benson started going upside down and digging around in the mud that the bung floated back to the top, and he saved the day. So that painting's about that story. The collection is the yearly thing when all the ducks and geese start laying the eggs. We don't use them at all, so we clear out the nests and we give them to the crows that come down. And the crows have learnt now, so that as soon as you go to do the ducks in the morning and you collect the eggs, the crows come down and arrive for the eggs to go in. And that's the dream, that I can just hand the eggs straight to the crow one day. One day. I've always liked really like time-intensive fiddly pastimes, so I was really into embroidery a couple of years back, and when I was doing a lot of embroidery I came upon like the Flemish tapestries, especially like the Millefleur tapestries, where it's all about just like filling all the negative space. And I think when it came to painting, moving from someone who did very small works to larger works, it made sense to me and it felt comfortable to just fill all the space possible with just stuff. And so I think when it comes to my painting, I'm really interested in that kind of like visual density of just feeling all the space. I attempt to use as a way of describing either the environment or use as a way to, I suppose, pack in little clues about either the surrounding or like the story itself that I'm trying to tell. So that's sort of been a big part of the way that I make work.